I'll make sure that's shown up online. Start here. Okay, I'm going to check online, make sure. Okay, we're live.
Hi, I'd like to thank you all for coming to the Restoration Community Church and SCIPP panel discussion on human trafficking. My name is Paul Schock, and what I'd like to do is have each individual at the panel introduce themselves, and then from there, they're actually going to talk a little bit about each situation and their organization dealing with human trafficking. And after that is done, we'll have a couple questions here and there. You can go first, Rick.
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay. My name is Rick Walter. I'm the Scott City Police Chief. I've been involved in human trafficking education for several years. Just took this job back here in Scott City about April the 1st. I guess that's a good day to be hired, April Fool's Day. But anyway, this is something I'm very passionate about, trying to educate people about human trafficking. I was probably more involved in the minor sex trafficking end of it. I've got a few years of working those cases and trying to educate the folks around here what's going on with that.
Great. And don't be afraid to hesitate to actually move the mics up to your mouth when you're talking so we can actually all hear.
Hello, my name is Jackie Castañeda, and I, like Brother Rick, we both work together on some human trafficking potential cases. Been involved with it since about 2014, I think. Right now, I'm not working with an agency that does the education, and that saddens me very much. The education needs to be there. The problem hasn't gone away. I'm an advocate for potential victims. I'm also an advocate for the Spanish population in our county, and whatever county, if they called, I would go and help. Been involved with doing some fingerprinting and questioning of some cases that went on in Kennett. There was a big ordeal with, most of my experience has been with labor trafficking. So there's a big deal that went on in Kennett, and a guy was busted for horse trafficking, and he got fined, and this has been a couple years ago, and he's back now. And probably doing the same things. He hasn't been caught yet. But I do a lot of volunteer work, and this is my passion as well. When we lost our grant in 2017, it just destroyed us, because we knew the problem was still there, and now no one was going to be out there educating. It is so needed. So thank you for having me.
My name is Kendra Eads. I'm the Executive Director of the Southeast Missouri Network Against Sexual Violence. We cover 9 counties in Southeast Missouri. Our agency actually just had its 25th anniversary. I am a social worker and have been with the agency since 2004. We serve adult and child victims of sexual violence, as well as child victims of physical abuse. And our involvement with trafficking is in the sex trafficking piece of it. Typically what we see, and I can talk more about this as we go on, but we see family members or significant others or spouses who are trafficking the children or women in their lives for money or drugs or other exchanges. We provide forensic care, so we work closely with individuals like the chief here, law enforcement, the Missouri Children's Division, the juvenile office, to make sure that children or adults are interviewed in a way that's non-leading, non-suggestive, that allows them to be the expert on what happened to them and talk about that. We provide that information to law enforcement to help with their investigations. We also provide medical exams. Those exams are by specially trained forensic nurses. We make sure that if anyone has potentially been exposed to HIV or other STIs, they can have prophylaxis medication and also Plan B if they've been sexually assaulted. We don't see a ton of these cases, but when we do, it is typically going to be somebody known to the victim.
Hi, and my name is Crystal Limpert. I am a survivor of familiar sex trafficking. I have been free for a little over 2 years. My trafficking was from Missouri to California and back. The Lord gave me life, and then He saved my life, and then He gave me a new life. And I have a passion to rescue other women. There is such a need. There are places for women to go once they're rescued, but none of them are full. There are so many beds open because there are so many women that have, and boys and men. There's this intake process of 2 to 4 weeks, and you don't have that much time. You might have 5 minutes your entire life to get out, and if someone doesn't act, then that's it. You might never have another chance. So by the grace of God, somebody helped me get out within that 20-minute period. So there is a need for women to be rescued immediately. So I am trying to start a nonprofit to do that. But it takes a lot of different wheels to be able to get that done. And a lot of women, they can just go on with their life and put it in the past like it didn't happen, and that's fine, but that is not how God made me. He gave me this information, and it's in my mind, and I have the knowledge for a reason, and what is in my head could save people's lives, so I can't just go on like it never happened. So I want to use my experience to help others.
The issue of human trafficking, I mean, I know a lot of people hear the saying human trafficking, but a lot of times it's not really explained what it's really about, what the increments of the whole issue is. And so what I would suggest for the panelists to actually bring up their own experiences, why they're involved with this subject, and what they see as the problem, what they also see as a solution, and what the community can actually do to help. So, Rick?
I got involved probably about 14, I guess, 2014, and didn't really understand it myself until I started reading more about it and started to get involved about it and trying to spread the information. One of my biggest roadblocks, and probably still is today, is law enforcement, because we don't understand. We think we know everything, but we don't, obviously. But trying to get them to understand what it entails, and again, I would never be able to understand it. I don't guess I've ever been a victim in my life, so it's really hard for me to understand what some of these folks go through. But when I started looking into it, I think we always work a lot. We worked a lot of cases of violence in the home and assaults, sexual assaults. But then the more I started looking into this, especially with minor sex trafficking, then I started thinking about cases that we worked in the past that could have been, maybe these kids were being trafficked, and nobody knew what to look for. And you know, we were good at solving some of these cases, but we wasn't addressing this problem. And so the more I got involved, I actually sat on the state board in 2016 for human trafficking. We had a committee that went around the state and was listening to issues. We had victims that was in the life that were able to get out of the life, and that's where you learn a lot from listening to those folks, and then trying to come back and apply that to educate law enforcement around this area. I had, like I said, my biggest stumbling block was judges, prosecutors, law enforcement, because they said that doesn't happen here. You know, it doesn't happen. That's something that would never happen here. We had a hearing in Kansas City, and it was a young man that was working with victims up there, and he said, we thought the problem was in the rural areas, and the people from the rural areas, we thought it was always just the city. You know, it's not our problem, because it just doesn't happen here, but it does. You know, it happens right here. I'm currently working a case right now. And it was really kind of odd, because I was talking to another officer, and he said, well, I don't think she's really being trafficked. I think she is. You know, she's throwing all the classic. It's her fault. It's, you know, the guy's protecting her. I'm looking at this guy maybe like being like a Romeo pimp. You know, that he's protecting her, but all the indicators are saying otherwise. You know, I had a case several years ago when I was sheriff in Scott County. We had a case that was brought to me, some information that may have happened just in another county, and so the scenario was that there was a 13-year-old girl that was being trafficked by a 40-something-year-old man, and I contacted the sheriff of the next county. We were going to get our detectives together, start working this case. When my detective, a couple weeks went by, come back, and he said the sheriff decided up there that they're not going to look at this case because this girl is 19 years old, so they're going to work it as a prostitution case, because she's been doing this since she was 13, so she knows what she's doing. That turns your stomach, you know, because I don't know. Again, I can never understand, but I don't know anybody that ever said, hey, a 12 or 13-year-old kid said, I want to do this, you know, be a prostitute the rest of my life. So that to me, that was huge, you know. It's like, you got a sheriff of a county that doesn't understand this, so what is his people saying, you know? And since it was not in my jurisdiction at that time, there's not a whole lot I could do, you know. And I disagreed with him working it as a prostitution case, because now you're re-victimizing the victim. Anyway, I probably need to shut up and let somebody else talk, but that's really very frustrating to me, is getting law enforcement involved and getting them to understand what's going on.
One of the saddest statements I've ever heard a judge make was that it was a victimless crime, that human trafficking was a victimless crime. The man needs a lot of education, and that's what I think is lacking so much in our area and every area, is there is no education going on in Southeast Missouri that I'm aware of. When we were working together, we had 3 coalitions, human trafficking awareness coalitions, one in Poplar Bluff, Sykeston, and Kennett. And we met, at one time we were meeting every month, and it went quarterly. And education, education, education. That is what's going to help the victims that are out there. Without the education, there's nothing anybody can do. It's just really, really sad. Since 2017, as far as I know, there's not been any education of human trafficking, no awareness made in Southeast Missouri. I would love to be a part of that again. Like I said, it is my passion. Worked with several potential victims. I was telling Rick a while ago, a lady from Columbia, they have a house up in Columbia for victims, and she called me maybe almost a year ago and said, hey, I need you to do something for me. I said, what's that? And she said, we've got a girl south of Sykeston, and she's wanting to get out. And can you go and pick her up and help her to, get out of that? And I said, no, ma'am, I can't do that. What I will do, though, when she's ready to leave, if you can get her to a public place, we'll make arrangements to get her out of there. So it happened, and I'm thankful that I was able to meet her and a police officer in another city and take her to St. Louis to get her on her way to another place where she was safe. That's my heart. That's my passion, is to help these people get safe and know that there is an answer. There is freedom. And I applaud you for being here today. Thank God you made it.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Thank God.
Yes. And if I can ever be of any kind of help, I want to be there for you and anybody else that I can help. Thank you.
Well, one of the things I think is a positive thing to share is that actually the first week of November, our agency held a couple of different trainings partnered with the Safe House. One of them was at Sykeston DPS and one of them was at Cape PD, where we brought in, we educated these folks, professionals, about what we do at NASV, what the the Safe House of SEMO does. And then we also brought in a couple folks from Homeland Security that did do some education on sex trafficking for law enforcement, Children's Division, the juvenile, the folks that were there. So we are starting to see that a little bit more in these communities as people become more aware of those things. We need our professionals to be asking the right questions, whether it be law enforcement or the Children's Division. When they get called in on these investigations for, sexual violence, they need to be asking questions about, if there was money exchanged, if they knew of anybody that was receiving drugs or other packages or things after these acts occurred. That's one of the things that our forensic interviewers do a good job of, is asking these questions, the peripheral questions around the abuse, to see if this is also going on, the trafficking part of it. We offer counseling and advocacy also. I apologize, I didn't mention that earlier, for victims at our office. All of those services are free of charge. The big thing I think we can do as a community is destigmatize discussing violence of any kind, but particularly sexual violence. There's so much guilt and shame around these issues. And one of the things that these perpetrators depend on is that we won't talk about this, that we will feel like it's rude or impolite because there is a relationship to sexuality, but that's not what this is. This is a crime. This is violence. So we have a program called the Green Bear Project that goes into the schools and provides education for pre-K through seniors in high school about no one has the right to hug, kiss, or touch you when you are on your body. If that happens, you can tell that person no, get to a safe place. We ask them about who are 3 grown-ups in your home that you could tell, who are 3 grown-ups in the community you could tell, who are 3 grown-ups at school you can tell. And if the first person you tell doesn't help you, you keep telling until somebody does. And the other thing that we reiterate is it is never, ever, ever the victim's fault, ever. Because I feel like if we can start having these conversations around these things about body safety, about who are the grown-ups in your life that you can trust, about online safety, that's also where some of this recruitment happens. I think the more we can talk about those things and educate our children and young people, they are going to go out into the world and have less shame around these things. And the moment something like this, the moment they're approached or something like this starts to happen, I hope they feel like they can go to a safe person like law enforcement and talk to them about that. So I would encourage folks to start by believing. If someone comes to you and says they're in a difficult situation, if they are in an unhealthy relationship, whatever those things are, if its child is saying, this person creeps me out, I don't want to be around, Uncle so-and-so, that's just an example. Believe them, hear them, because we have to realize how much this costs people to come forward about this, whether it be trafficking or any type of sexual violence. There's a lot weighing on them to come forward about this, whether it's their own personal safety. They may have been threatened, the safety of their family, their children, their pets. That's another big thing that's used. So we would just really, at SEMO NASV, we would encourage folks to talk about these issues. And things like this is a perfect example of what we need to be doing in our communities, is having these conversations. And I would also like to thank you, Crystal, for coming forward and speaking about what happened to you. And we need those survivor voices. We need those advocates, because until you're in that situation, you can't know exactly what that feels like. And all of us that are doing this work need to hear from folks like you about this. So thank you so much for your advocacy.
Thank you. And there's so much that I want to piggyback on here. I have to start with trust. It's so hard to come forward because nobody trusts you. I was drugged the majority of the time. So they make you look and feel like you're crazy. So then when you try and reach out for help, nobody helps you because you're just a drug addict, you're just crazy. I did this study with University of Texas for like the correlation between mental health, trafficking, and counseling. Like, how do we help? And they say, well, one of the questions was, if someone comes to counseling and they're being trafficked, how would we know? Well, first of all, someone's being trafficked is not going to be allowed to go to counseling unless it's court ordered. And then so many records are opened that they don't trust that it's not going to be opened, or that their family member or whoever is involved isn't going to find out. So trust that that is the number one thing. Like, until you build that rapport and they think or they believe that they can trust you and it's not going to come back to hurt them, they're not going to tell you anything. I'm glad to hear that that you're finally bringing domestic violence and sex trafficking into one, because they keep separating them. Like, when I was trying to find somebody to help me, the main thing was, well, if it's trafficking, then it's not domestic violence. And if it's domestic violence, then it's not trafficking. So nobody would help. And another thing, if you're over 29, there's no help. If you're over 29, you weren't trafficked, because there's an age limit. And I get that. There's so much healing. There's so much that goes into the process of helping someone. Like, I think I was 40 when I was trafficked. Well, when it was called trafficking. I've been trafficked all my life, but I didn't know it until it hit at the end, because in the beginning, it was rape or it was incest. It wasn't called trafficking. But then I look back and I go to the biblical, and they call it modern day trafficking, modern day slavery. But if you look in the Bible, Joseph was trafficked. That was labor trafficking. He was sold and then into sex, and that was trafficking. It just wasn't called that then. So as a child, I was trafficked, but it wasn't called that. When I went for help, when I finally reached out, when I realized that I was being drugged, I went to the hospital. In my case, the cartel was involved because I was in California, so there was that. The police officers that finally came, because this was in the middle of COVID, so COVID was more important than anything that I was trying to lie to them about. So I waited for a couple hours. The police officers finally came. 2 male police officers hovered over me, telling me that there's no way this was happening because it only happens in hotel rooms. It doesn't happen in houses. Then I left. I talked to the advocate again. She met me. The advocate put me in a hotel room, and the kidnappers that kidnapped me next were in the next room. The advocate never came back. So they got me out of the situation, but then my traffickers knew that I knew. So then it got really dangerous. That's when the chase was on. And it is only by God's grace that I am alive. Like, they stole my ID, so I couldn't rent a hotel room. There's no bathrooms because it's COVID. So I have to depend on people that I don't know to help me. And then when I go to law enforcement, I'm told that I'm on drugs and that I'm crazy and that they're going to send me to the mental hospital. And when you tell them names, then it gets even worse because they know those people. So in my situation, it was bad. And it was labor, it was sex, it was torture. It wasn't even sex trafficking, it was torture. And then when they're done with you with that, then they sell you for your organs. By the grace of God, I was still legally married because I should have been in Jordan by now. I was supposed to be sent to the country of Jordan. But women that are married are traceable. Women that are single are not. So, by the grace of God, I was still married. People say it doesn't happen here. It's a small town. It's a big town. If you have a zip code, you have trafficking. It's next door and you don't know it. They're online and you don't know it. I've worked with Operation Underground Railroad and Rescue America, and it's everywhere. There's people that were trafficked on Instagram. I mean, if you have a computer, you are you are a very good candidate for trafficking, especially if your parents and the adults in the house are not paying attention, because especially kids, they think it's innocent, and they don't realize that the world that we live in these days is not innocent. And I fear for kids these days. I thought it was bad when I was a child, and it's just so much worse now. So when I reached out to help, my family was involved. When I reached out for help, I was told that there's no way that's happening to you because that only happens to young pretty girls. I had charges in California. California was the first to drop them. Missouri was the worst. And it was a misdemeanor. And I had to prove that I had been trafficked to get this case dropped. So I sent them the letters that I had. I didn't want to have to go dig in the FBI's records and to get all this information and to be re-victimized and live in my past to get this information just to have this misdemeanor dropped. And by the grace of God, I prayed about it and I got a call that they dismissed it. They dropped some to city ordinances, but by that time I had fought it for 4 years, so I was happy with that. But it's just, the victim is always the victim, and you don't want to be. I don't want to be a victim, I want to be a survivor. But they keep you trapped in that. Like, I'm having to try and change my social security number, because I can't even keep a bank account open, because every time I try to, they find it and they close my accounts down for fraudulent activity. Like, is this ever going to end? And it's so hard to get your social security number changed. And then with that, we'll have to change my name. Like, I have to change my entire life. But the people that did this to me will never, they've gone on with their lives and they're doing this to somebody else. And back on that, they say forgiveness. And when this first happened to me and I walked away and I got free, I said, I refuse to hate these people. Because if I do, I'm still being held captive by then. So I refuse to hate them. I forgive them. It was Satan working through them who did this to me. It was not them. I just want to stop this from happening to somebody else. So if they damaged my vocal cords, so I don't like to talk. And throughout my healing, I kept saying, don't lose your voice. People kept saying, don't lose your voice. And I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? I can't talk now. And little by little, I got my voice back, and now I'm doing what the Lord said, and I'm using my voice. Because if I don't help others, and I don't speak up about what happened to me, then it could happen to anybody else. And I don't want that on me, because I didn't use my voice and try to be the voice for them when they couldn't.
Thank you. I know that a lot of people in the community here, I mean, as you guys had said, that people don't think that actually happens in our own town, our own backyard. We don't realize that at least almost half of our population in Scott City is rentals. And then at the same time, if you go to the school will actually verify at least a fourth of those families at school are only here for 6 months to a year. And it's perpetuating where they actually go from one town to another town to another town. And they do that for a reason of basically so they're not traced or they're not in the system or held accountable for some of their actions. You never know what's going on. It could be drugs, could be other things, could be money. And it's hard to keep track of those kids. And there's a lot of things that are the unknowns that we don't know about that can actually happen. And it comes to a realization that, as you guys were talking about, it could be even individuals that you look upon as leaderships in the community that could actually try to take advantage of kids or individuals. I think it's deplorable in the sense that it sounds like there was a lot going on years ago, and now we don't have a system as much. Education is a big thing. I mean, Rick, is there anything going on at the academy as far as education on this level?
You know, I had some things I was going to say, and then she started talking, and I don't know that I'm even worthy to sit up here with her. But that's something that I would like to try to introduce at the state level where it's mandatory. You know, we have to have so many hours every year, 24 hours of training every year to keep our license, our post license, and to stay certified. I think that that's something that I would like to address with, and it would have to come from the state lawmakers to mandate that you have to do so many hours of training every year in human sex trafficking or human trafficking.
Well, it seems like it would be across the board, not just for officers, maybe for the lawyers, because most of the lawyers have become judges
yes,
or lawmakers.
And they have their requirements too, you know. Of course, you know, those folks are a lot smarter than I am, you know, and so, but I think that I think they need to be trained also. It should be some type of mandatory training with the prosecutors, you know, whenever they attend their classes. But from law enforcement, because we're kind of the first people that deal with somebody. But I really believe that we need to address that at the state level and require law enforcement to take that training.
Because I see from the conversation so far, there's a lot of clogs in the wheel over the years, that there's a lot of mishaps. And the people that are actually losing out are the victims. And they're also going back to being shamed and re-victimized. And it's a matter of trying to break that system, but it's basically sooner or later you lose the energy and you lose the willpower to actually fight it. And you just perpetuate the system. And that's the big problem right there. And trying to overcome all that. I mean, from the individual, I mean, again, it could be a child that is a male or female, could be age of, who knows, could even be a infant, could be a adult, as we're talking about in the system, and being able to educate individuals to understand the streamline of what the severity is of this whole situation is a hard one, it sounds like.
You know, one thing she touched on, and I always look at it because is trust. You know, look at me. You know, here I am. I come in and I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna save the day and help you. Are you really gonna trust me? Look at the way I look. You know, how can I possibly know what you're going through? I don't have a clue. You know, I'm there. I want to do what I can. So I think that we need people like you to come in and be the advocate that says, hey, I know this is what I've experienced, this is what I can do, what I have to offer. And again, there needs to be funding for stuff like this, you know. I had some advocates that worked for me before, and it was just, I sent them to training, and we actually had some, we done reverse, where we would target the John, you know. But we was also trying to get that person out of their life too. So whenever we would, because you could, like you said, you can get online and I guess for lack of better terms, order up whatever you want, you know, and then and that person comes. So we would meet with the trafficked female. Usually it was female, and try to offer her services to get out of that life. Again, you know, the people that I had working, well intentioned, but they just couldn't really relate to that person. I could read off a script all day long and say, this is what we're here to do, and we're here to help. Have you ever heard that? I'm from the government, I'm here to help. Who trusts that, you know? So trust is a big thing, and NASB, you know, we in law enforcement, especially where I come from, I abuse them. It's like, hey, you know, these folks know what they're doing. This is, you know, I really do thank God every day for when we have them. I really do, because they're awesome. I have a lot of questions that I can say, why don't you ask these questions? But again, if I sit across from a victim, you know, they're gonna say, what's this fat boy know? He don't know anything, you know. So I applaud you for coming forward, and I hope that we could get lawmakers to recognize some of this problem, and maybe we can come up with funding, you know, to expand NASB, you know, and have people that will be able to go out with us in law enforcement and say, there's a problem here. You're not seeing this, you know.
Rick, you said trust, and it sounds like, again, across the board, is that you actually had a police chief in another county that basically there was no trust there.
Yeah, well, it was a sheriff of another.
A sheriff in another county.
Yeah.
There was no trust there in the
Right.
sense of being able to go to somebody that
Yeah.
would actually understand. And again, it goes back to victimizing. The other problem that I see, and I've heard about stories from other people, is that, I mean, you have a lot of agencies, a lot of organizations in the state that are just so overwhelmed. And so the manpower is just not there for things. And so things fall out of the pit. And a good example, as we were talking about earlier, is foster care. I mean, it's great. Foster care is a wonderful thing. And a lot of people actually have to go through training in order to do it. But if it's under the family, they don't have to really go through training. And I've heard horror stories where one family member to another family member, they're passed on, abused, and passed on to another family member, and it just perpetuates the system. And that's just like anything else. But it is about education. And it's about trying to get that information out as far as law enforcement, legal, get the state level to actually mandate certain things, and understanding that there is a problem. And we are afraid as a community to even address it or talk about it, because it's like, well, it's not here because I don't want to talk about it. It's wiped away.
You know, we've done presentations in other schools around, and I was doing a presentation down south at a school it was a workshop for teachers, and we were talking about what signs to look for, and you talk about kids moving around, being moved around. It's hard to track them down. These after it was over with, the superintendent and the principal come up to me and a couple of other teachers. They said, we had a kid that was here that it sounded exactly like everything that we had talked about in that presentation, that may have been something going on, and then they just all of a sudden abruptly they just up and leave. But they don't know where this kid went. They don't know, you know, they think that they went to Memphis, you know, they think they may have moved, but they're not sure, and so they just kind of disappeared. But I mean, I think that's why we need to get out and educate these people, and like you said, education is a huge thing, and get it into the schools. I know it's kind of a hard subject sometimes to talk about, and especially with kids, you know. And we've done that before, but we separate the boys, you know, and we do a class with them, and then we do the girls, because let's face it, boys are idiots sometimes, you know? But if you get them separated, it works out pretty well, you know? But it is hard to bring into the school sometimes and talk about something like this.
One of the things I wanted to point out, and I think it sounds like from what I know of Crystal's story, that this is really prevalent there. Because these things don't happen in a vacuum or they don't stay typically within one community, that's where a lot of this breaks down is law enforcement from multiple jurisdictions, similar to what you talked about, Chief. We need task forces. We need, interstate, some sort of communication and cooperation. I know Homeland Security is a part of that, the FBI, because if folks have different practices and they don't talk to each other, these things, like you said, they can move from one community to another. And if people were wise to them in this one, well, they'll just move to this one until they become wise to them again. So I think it's not just about trusting the local law enforcement. It's about, can you go, these cases are complicated. Can you go track down all these people? We've done what we call extended forensic interviews of adult survivors who have been trafficked, where it takes 2 to 3 sessions, hour and a half, sometimes 2-hour sessions. You know what I'm talking about. Where just to get the details, the depth and breadth of it is unimaginable. Who all the players are, where the locations were, what all the acts were. And I think that's where we lose a lot of these things, is that maybe one jurisdiction does some things, but the other one doesn't, or they won't cooperate with each other or extradite someone or whatever that is. So I would also implore not just our state lawmakers, but our federal lawmakers to talk about how we can do this in a way that is everybody coming together to track these folks, because hopping around to jurisdictions is how they're getting by with it a lot of times.
You know, we had, at one time, they had set up a task force, I guess, for the Eastern District of Missouri, which you just take, Missouri pretty much split it in half, and that's what there was 6 people to work probably close to 60 counties, you know. You're not getting anything done, you know. They got out and they done everything they could, bless their hearts, but they're overwhelmed on because they're in the northern part of the state, and we need somebody down in the Boot Hill and all.
I can imagine just one case alone.
Yes.
It's not enough.
No, it's not near enough, you know. And again, one of the things that I really like to do is try to reach out to the victims and get them out of that life, you know. And again, that's where somebody like you are able to have the knowledge that I don't have, you know, to be able to talk to them.
And I'm willing.
Yeah.
I want to go
Yeah.
in. I want to physically go in with a male agent or somebody that I trust and get them out. Because it takes someone going in that they can see, that they can trust,
Yes.
to say, come with me, it's okay, you know. Because if you come in after me, I'm not going with you.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I'm just not.
And I'm sure it has nothing to do with it. No.
No.
I mean, it is. I understand that. You know, I get that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's where we need these advocates to come.
And a lot of people don't realize that it's brainwashing.
Yes.
It's almost
Yes.
like a cult itself.
Absolutely. And they keep you so drugged.
Yes.
That when you try and get out, nobody believes you. And like you talked about the story, it's so in depth and there's so many details that your brain is like overloaded with all this information, and you're trying to tell them, and they just think you're crazy because it's nicknames and it's places you don't know, and it's, well, I remember this center, this thing, and you sound crazy because there's so many details that you're trying to remember, and coming out of the fog of being drugged. Yeah, it takes someone like you to sit down and take the time to take all these notes and try and piece it back together. I'm still trying to piece everything together because I never got anybody to listen to it all. Like, I had this police officer here, this advocate here, take bits and pieces, but then say, okay, well, oh wait, that's happening. And then it got dropped. So, like, I just have bits and pieces that, as I'm supposed to remember, the Lord will reveal to me, but for now, it comes back, you know, as it's supposed to, so.
Well, even like the trust, you know, we talked about the trust before, you know, if if you have, if somebody, if there's a pimp or whoever is trafficking this victim, you know, from my understanding, you know, the victim's told, look, if you get caught, you're going to jail. You're going to go to jail. It's going to be a record on you. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to walk away. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Is everything that person that's doing the trafficking says is coming true, because that's what we're doing. We're just arresting her because she's,
Yes.
first of all, she's high on drugs. She got drugs in her system, you know, and we think we're good at that,
Yeah.
but we don't realize that we just re-victimize the victim,
Yes.
you know, and we're high-fiving each other, patting each other on the back that we made this arrest, and we've done more harm than good.
Yes.
Things aren't always black and white. There's a lot of gray in
Yep.
it.
Yeah. And a lot of people say, why trafficking? Well, drugs, you have to buy over and over and over, and you can get caught with them. A person you can sell over and over and over, and then when you're done with that, sell them for their organs or sell them to work. Like, you can re-victimize them, and you can resell them over and over again, and you don't get in trouble for having a person with you because they're too scared to say anything anyway. So if you get caught with them, it's not illegal, where drugs and guns are.
Well, at one time, it was the 1, 2, 3. It was drugs, it was guns, and then trafficking.
Yes.
And then the trafficking moved up
Yes.
above the gun sales.
Yes.
Because of the illegal guns. You know, hey, if I get caught with that, you know, it's easy to prove.
Absolutely.
Again, law enforcement, we're good at that. But and the drug dealer or the gun dealer, you know, whenever they get rid of their supply or sell their supply, they got to go back and replenish their
Yes.
supply. If you have a person, you've got one person, you just sell that person over and over and over again, you know. And like you said, nobody really thinks, and if, like even at just a vehicle stop, nobody ever thinks about asking the right questions, you
Right.
know, separating somebody and just getting them out of the car. And at least you've tried. And if we educate us, law enforcement, you know, that's the only way I can speak from is
Yes.
our end. But I think that if we start looking for those indicators, you know, and know what to look for, then we can do a better job.
I also noticed when from Missouri to California and back to Missouri, the first time that I saw the number anywhere for the sex trafficking hotline was in the airport when I'd already escaped. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm in this bathroom, but if I'm still being trafficked, I don't have a phone. So how would I use this number if I could? So there needs to be some kind of way for a person to use this number, a button or something, so that they can push it like a bank without the trafficker knowing. Because the only place that a female is going to go, and sometimes she won't even go to the bathroom by herself. They'll have another female with her, or he'll go with her. But there's never that opportunity to get away to call. So if there was a code or a button or something that, and a camera so they could line up who it was, something. Because like I was amazed that was the first, it didn't even dawn on me, that was the first time I saw the number. And then, okay, well, I got the number, but what am I gonna do with it?
Yeah, and that's us not always knowing what to do either. I mean,
Yes.
you know, the numbers out there, it's like, well, it's a start.
Yeah.
But now what else do we do, you know?
And it takes somebody that's been there to recognize those little things.
Yes.
But throughout my
Yes.
journey in this, nobody wants to listen. Oh, you're not healed enough. You're not ready for this. Only God knows that.
And I know a lot of times too, I mean, talking about airports, I mean, you do have a lot of individuals from overseas that do come in on false pretenses, and they're actually trafficked. And then you also have individuals in the States that are actually trying to get brides on overseas and trying to bring them here. And basically what they're doing is they're trafficking them too. It's a big issue, and you're right. It's not really looked upon as a problem. It's looked upon as just a social norm almost, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think with all your guys' help, and hopefully down the line we could find a way to create that machine to make things aware, as far as people aware, and help people out, such as yourself. I mean, most people your age, I'm sorry to say, as you pointed out, going through your situation, they're not here anymore. And fortunately and luckily, and thank God that you're actually here, and which we're thankful to actually hear your voice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Don't ever lose your voice.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the audience? If you can come up to the mic and ask the questions.
Okay. I'm a nurse and I worked at doctor's offices, most of my life. And a lot of times we're taught what to look for. But for the person, say, that works at the grocery store, the gas station clerks, where some things might be happening there, and you talk about trafficking, but what do they need to look for? And maybe explain a little bit more about what trafficking is to just the everyday person, that is not taught what trafficking is and what they need to look for. Maybe hangouts or, where kids hang out and there's adults there working there or something, what they can look for to, see what's going on. I mean, I know it's hard to say without getting into detail.
It depends on the atmosphere. It depends on where you're at. It depends on what kind of trafficking. If it's rural, so some women are going to be branded. They're going to have certain tattoos that don't fit in. A lot of times they're going to have nicknames. They're not going to look you in the eye. You might ask them a million questions and they're never straightforward with you. A lot of times they won't be driving themselves. They'll have someone with them, or someone who is, if you see them over and over again, there's someone always over their shoulder, and they feel like they really can't say much. They're very standoffish. They're gonna, I guess I would say, appear shy when they're scared. It really depends on the situation.
Yeah, but I think it is good to get people educated more, because you have waitresses that see people over and over and over, and they can be watching for those things. But if they don't know they should be,
Yes.
then that's another one that maybe is lost.
There was an organization I worked with. I cannot remember the name of them, but they do training for law enforcement, for nurses, for the community, different for schools, and they show you the signs. And then they went further to say, okay, well, now we've shown you the signs. Now what do you do with it once you know the signs? So there's some training that I could tell you about, but I'd have to find the organization's information. And it's online, it's free, it's very simple, but yeah.
I think there's, I met a couple girls that was into life, and one of them, she was a waitress. She was actually a waitress, and her story was that she's working as a waitress, and this, so they have a spotter comes in, and he starts gathering information. He's an older guy, real friendly, and he's gathering all this information about this young girl, and she just thinks he's just some old guy that's really nice. And that goes over a period of time, and then he finds out what she likes, what she likes to do, and then they bring in another boy bring in a younger boy that's more her age, and then he starts being real nice to her, offering her money, getting to be real friendly, and so they're grooming this person is what they're doing, and so it takes a little bit of a process, but what they're trying to do with her is they're going to get her out of that area. So they're planning on taking her, moving her from wherever she's at now to another area. Well, they find out where she would like to go, where her dream city, so and And so they gather all this information, and then, and boom, they end up taking her out, but she thinks she's going on her own. She thinks that she's doing it, willingly. And then all of a sudden, she now next thing she's in a strip club, and they're making her do a lot of things that obviously she doesn't want to do. But luckily, that I guess she had taken her family car and they was going to return it. And whenever she brought it back is when an old boyfriend intervened, and then they got people involved, got law enforcement involved, and they found out that she was getting ready. What they had done, they had was planning on moving her to another part of the country completely from where she had been promised, and like I said, they bought her gifts. So there was all this, it was kind of an elaborate type thing, but that's something, kind of to look for too. And then another girl that I'd met, she was being trafficked in her own town. And so what she was doing, and a lot of her friends, after this was over with, then they realized that maybe they could have called somebody, but they got the bad guy, the guy that was trafficking her locally, would separate her from her friends. Her friends wasn't any good. He starts running the friends down. Then they start giving her drugs, and then all of a sudden she's changing. She's starting to change. So she's not wearing the same clothes that she has. So there's those little indicators like that is stuff to look for. But again, you got to realize that could happen right here. And the little town that she was in, they didn't think anything about it. They just thought, well, she's just going through this phase, and she's going, and that happens too, with kids. But that she's just going through this phase, and there's nothing really to it. But then she was being trafficked, and it was pretty hardcore before it was over with, before they could get her out. And so there's certain kids that will be targeted. If there's not all, but if they have issues at home, their home life, they may be easy targeted for somebody to swoop in and say, hey, I'm here to help. I'm a good guy here. And your mom and dad or whoever, family members are just, they're the bad guys. And so, and one of the places that you can look online too is Shared Hope International. They do quite a bit of education, and I just recently got back involved with them. I'd worked with them before as an ambassador. So that's some place that maybe you could go online, and hopefully in the near future, what I would like to do is get more information, and because I don't really know that much, it's like I know to put phone numbers up, but I don't know what else to do after that, and maybe put signs up, of what to look for. We talked about airports before. Luckily, like in 15 or 16, a girl that I went to high school with, she's a manager at the Lambert Airport, and we went up and met with her, and we put signs, was able to put signs up in Lambert Airport because I knew somebody, and that was all I knew to do at the time.
That's where I saw my first one.
Yeah. So okay, that got me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wheels come right around. Yep.
One thing I would like to add too, as far as resources, there's, it's called Polaris Project
Yes.
online, and they have so much information. They have those signs that you're wanting to know about. But that's a very, very good place to learn and be educated about it. They've also got a little test you can take, and it says it certifies you as a human trafficking awareness person, but there's a lot more to it than just a 20-minute video. But check out Polaris Project.
There's also the Blue Campaign.
Yes.
Well, first I want to tell you all that I appreciate you all being here and your passion in this. And you too, Crystal. Love you.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I work for the United States Postal Service, and I'm a city carrier. And so I've been doing that for about 19 years now. And I just wondered, is there a group that you would send, like to companies like that? Like, we're there every day walking to these houses, every day, so we can see people every single day. I have never thought about that. Never thought you know, about that. Because I have heard about trafficking, but I always thought that, you know, that didn't happen around here, you know. So I was just wondering, do you have groups that would go to these, you know, bigger facilities, you know, that go to these, that see these people all the time, you know,
I mean, as far as training?
right, or just what to
Like-
look
like-
out for?
Like a presentation, and that's something that I've done before too. We've, like I said, we've pretty much been all over the state and was able to, I think the Missouri Sheriff's Association, the first time that anything had ever been presented to them, who was involved in. And then with the Missouri Treasurers Association, I've done a presentation for them. And so, yeah, that's something that I'm trying to get going,
Right.
back up and running. And my wife doesn't know it yet, but she's about to get volunteered for doing some of this too. But and
Congratulations.
she's helped me before, and she's an educator anyway, so she does a lot better presentations than I do. But that's what we would like to do is reach out to organizations and say, hey, you know, if there's 10 people or there's 100 people, we will do that, and that's something that I'm committed to doing.
Because I was just thinking, because with the Postal Service, like I said, you know, we're carriers, we're getting out there, we're walking
Yes.
every single day, and we go by the same house every day, and we see the people out there.
Yeah.
But, you know, as far as knowing what to look for and things like that, you know, and I just thought, you know, Postal Service is all over, you
Yes.
know?
Great idea.
So,
Yes,
I mean,
I
at least
really
that's,
encourage you to go to Polaris or the Blue Campaign, either one. There's a lot of good information on there.
okay, thank you.
I like to sort of wrap things up, but I think the biggest thing is education, information, and not be shy. And then the other thing is going after our state representatives, our lawmakers, and our federal lawmakers too, to actually help facilitate something so that the system's not broken. So thank you all very much for your help and your assistance and your stories. I think they've touched all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.